Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for a very special episode 2 of the Unleashing DeWi podcast. I'm really excited because we've got a super special guest here who's got a lot of insights that we're excited to share with all of you. So please welcome me in joining David Byrd. He is a partner at BlueYard Capital, and they are a venture fund that invests in a lot of innovation, and specifically, they've invested in some DeWi projects. So, David, thank you so much. I appreciate you joining the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Tyler.
Yeah, wonderful. So I'd love to start off with, if you could just give the audience a quick background about you, yourself. How did you become a VC? And give us a bit of your background if you could.
Yeah, I was a failed entrepreneur before I was a VC. I tried to start a software container company to compete against Docker. Long story short, they beat us really bad and gave away their product for free and raised hundreds of millions of dollars. And you ended up returning the money I had left to investors. And one of the angel investors who invested in my company informed me that I worked for him. Then I needed to work off the rest of my debt to him forever. And so that's how I ended up working in, jokes aside, that's how I ended up working in venture capital. He hired me first part-time and then full-time.
Wow.
And then I joined BlueYard about a year ago.
Okay, super interesting. And I guess in your transition into being a VC at BlueYard, what specifically got you into crypto and then particularly into DeWi? Was there sort of a series of events, or was it, this is what we're doing and this is where you're at? How did that sort of come to fruition for you?
Yeah, I think I was looking at the Facebook Magma, so less so in crypto and more in how I got into the decentralized wireless space. There was this open source packet core Facebook created called Magma. A lot of the early contributors to that, ended up founding FreedomFi, but they were also people who had come from my previous life in the developer tools world. They started a previous business called Mirantis, still around today, does kind of Kubernetes, OpenStack, company. And so I kind of followed the project, followed them, and then it kind of came time for them to raise money. We had a series of conversations, and BlueYard ended up leading their Series A.
Wow.
So I guess that was kind of our, into decentralized wireless. Into crypto more broadly, when I worked for this angel investor, Hank Vigil, we had a number of investments, dating back to probably 2014, 2013 in various crypto networks. So we were early investor in Blockstream, which one of the early Bitcoin core teams.
Yep.
And then a lot along the way. And then more recently, things like Axie Infinity. So, we went from full, Bitcoin hardliner to, gaming degen. So yeah, we invested in a lot of stuff and so, learned a lot of hard lessons along the way.
Yeah. Well, this is an interesting time in crypto. There's been lots of new hard lessons learned in recent times with all the FTX insanity going on. But taking sort of the just general crypto markets out of the equation, how are you evaluating, or how would you evaluate the current state of the DeWi landscape?
Yeah, I would say crypto is a couple of different subcultures, a couple of different groups that we all kind of group into crypto. So you have the Bitcoin people who are fix the money, fix the world, sort of want to replace fiat currency. You have the NFT people who, many of them, it's about content rights management, artists continuing to get paid in some way. And then I would say you have the bucket that I would put decentralized wireless in is this incentivized machine that can allow humans to be organized and capital to be organized to go build some physical asset. It's basically asking the question, what if the Bitcoin miners did something useful instead of generating a bunch of hashes? Yeah. And I would put Filecoin, which BlueYard was an early investor in that same bucket. I'd put a lot of, especially early Ethereum, in that bucket. It's sort of how do we do something useful? Helium certainly in that bucket. And so this is the bucket that I think BlueYard focuses on in crypto. What I would say of these three buckets, they all kind of made a Faustian pact, a deal with the devil, with the fourth bucket, which is the highly speculative, degens, for lack of a better word, who, the same sort of impulse that, drives meme stocks or 100x leverage, crypto futures. And so I think what's happened in light of the FTX stuff, but even before then, with some of the like crazy NFT projects that got launched, was just like when irresponsible stuff happens because of the like pact, with this degen crowd, the baby gets thrown out with the bathwater, and it becomes like really, really challenging for these communities to kind of move forward. Because like to the average person, like they don't know the difference between trying to build out a cell phone network, like with Helium building out a 5G network, and like Bored Apes and Bitcoin and FTX. Like these are just all the same thing to most consumers and also to most investors. And so I think there's going to be a lot of like regulatory crackdowns that make it actually very difficult to build a lot of the stuff that people are trying to build in decentralized wireless. So I would say, valuation and capital invested are like well ahead of the actual technical progress and also the user adoption and commercial progress, which makes it a challenging place to invest. I mean, like maybe that will change over the next year or two. So we're focusing on investing early and in the earliest stages of projects, as opposed to, later stage investments and things that already exist today.
Sure. Yeah, that's really interesting. And that landscape will, I'm sure, continue to evolve, especially as a lot of these situations sort of change the general perspective, and those buckets that you said become unfortunately closer and closer intertwined. But as you're looking at the DeWi landscape in particular, where are you seeing the blue ocean opportunities that maybe transcend some of those problems that we're dealing with, or where they're interconnecting some of the differences between consumer applications or a future commercial enterprise that may not exist today? Where are you seeing opportunities when it comes to DeWi?
Yeah, I mean, I think the overall opportunity is like, how do you build an MNO or MVNO that is run in a decentralized way? And so you disaggregate the hardware layer from the software layer, let's call it. So in going back to like Bitcoin, you have all these miners who are running hardware. Nothing they do can like tamper with the software layer, which is like the Bitcoin protocol. And so if you can create the same thing for something that's more useful, like say an MNO, that's great. And so like I think Helium's trying to do that. There's a lot of challenges from a technical perspective in doing this to begin with, and then if you have the 900 and something thousand hotspots that have already been bought for LoRaWAN, which is like a low bandwidth protocol, there aren't a lot of uses for it. There's not a lot of customers for it. People I think might feel burned on that and not be super keen to like go forward and buy a multi-$1,000 small cell. And then I think when they buy that small cell, they're going to feel even more burned if it ends up being like, hey, LTE is not the protocol we're using. Maybe we go with Wi-Fi 6, or maybe we go with some 5G protocol. And now you bought this multi-$1,000. I know you said you just bought one this morning, or it gets delivered this morning or something, but like I think we run the risk of, if the technology is not ready, people feel burnt on having spent money on this stuff and then not had any return on it. So that's the challenge. And so I think it makes it certainly not a blue ocean. It's certainly a red ocean. Certainly a lot of people trying to do it, whether it's Pollen or Helium or many more. But I think that's where the opportunity is. And I think whoever cracks the nut, it's like a, AT&T size business.
Yeah, that's a really unique way of looking at it. Talking about what I just got today would lead me to arguably the most impressive and exciting DeWi investment that BlueYard has made is in FreedomFi. So when you first made that investment, what was the thesis that drove this is a project that we want to back?
I think the team. I think Boris is clearly an unstoppable force who has been through it in the cloud wars, let's call it. So the last, let's call it 100 billion in revenue, from almost zero, 15 years earlier would be like the cloud. And I think Boris like saw the cloud and, worked in that industry and was part of that growth and built a really substantial business. But I think he didn't build like the most substantial business, and he kind of learned in that building like where real value went, like AWS and Amazon and Microsoft with Azure made so much more money than the people who did like OpenStack or even like the VMwares of the world, the Red Hats of the world. Yeah. And so I think he now understands like where you need to sit in the value stack and these sort of things, has a very nuanced view, has an experienced view. and so does the rest of his team. So now they've been acquired by Helium, and he's at Nova Labs, running their mobile business. And so I'm actually like really optimistic in terms of Nova Labs' mobile business and how they'll be able to build a better business there. And I think it's a huge opportunity. How people can invest in that, I don't know. Like I think the amount of progress that exists today is like basically zero. And even with FTX, contagion, the price of helium is still pretty high.
Right.
And so, and if the price of helium goes lower, then you also need to wipe out all these miners and this whole community. And so it's this kind of like damned if you do, damned if you don't situation they're in, which is pretty tough. And then not to mention like moving to Solana. Solana also is having a series of problems, related to FTX contagion. So it's pretty tough. So while I think they're a great team and I hope they're successful, I think there's also opportunities for lots of other people to build a ecosystem where lots of companies work together and lots of companies do different things. Like I don't think DeWi equals Helium. And I think also Helium as a protocol could mean lots of companies working together in a kind of cohesive way and building this vision together. So that's kind of stuff I'm investing in, is just like supporting this overall ecosystem.
Sure. Yeah. And so if we were to sort of peel back the layers a little bit, you mentioned Boris in particular as being part of like a really incredible team. When you were evaluating opportunities, how do you sort of think about picks and shovels versus consumer applications, and how does the founder and the team come into that? So if someone's saying, hey, I see this opportunity with DeWi, I see where this is going, I think I've got a value add product or service that we can bring to the market, and I'm interested in raising money. What are you looking for in particular for someone that would want to go down that path?
Yeah, I think we're looking for real commercial traction. Like you have users who pay for your product because it's great and they get some value from it. When we invested in FreedomFi, they hadn't actually started doing anything for Helium yet. So they actually were providing like a hardened configuration of Magma for a number of customers who wanted private CBRS networks.
Sure.
And so they just had the kind of skill set, and then they saw the Magma, they saw the Helium opportunity, and they were like, great, let's go after this and tackle this. And so I think when we invest in a company, we want to make sure that they're driving like real commercial value for their end customers and for their users, and not just being driven by kind of speculative dynamics. Going back to the degen deal with the devil, I think like we try to avoid these businesses and kind of always have, because it's like it all ends in tears. It's sort of like great on the way up. But no amount of sunshine in the Bahamas will make it any less toxic on the way down. So
yeah, right. The other aspect that we touched on, or that you touched on a little bit, was that FreedomFi is, to my understanding, the only project in the DeWi space that has been exited. So they were acquired by Helium, as you mentioned. How do you see the transition of the DeWi industry sort of progressing over time? There's clearly been players in the space that are competing with incumbents, and there's people competing with trying to build the actual network layer itself. They're trying to provide the hardware that could maybe be a part of that, where they're building atop the network. How do you see the actual industry? Is it there's going to be a handful of players that shake out to be the protocols that win, and everybody builds atop those? Or how are you seeing that over time? If you were to guess what will happen in 5 or 10 years?
I think generally, in any industry, especially in technology, it's turtles all the way down. So rather than trying to replicate something that exists today and say, oh, I'm going to launch my own token against Helium, I think the question is, how do you layer what you're doing into Helium in a way that everyone wins and provides more value to that overall ecosystem? And also you can, because you're providing more value, capture some of that additional value you're creating. So, when I look at, for example, like what you guys are doing at Enum, I think that this is just like one piece of something that would go into a broader ecosystem, but an important piece, and there's lots of value that can be created on top of that. So yeah, I mean, that's how we evaluate investments, I think, generally. If you're just trying to replace something that exists today and you think there's like a quick way to make a buck in, getting acquired, that's probably not, our type of investment. We don't really like think about exits as a win. I think ideally we're investing in businesses that we can hold forever. and are just like really great enduring businesses. So, while I'm excited for the FreedomFi team and it, is great financially for them, I think, part of me is still sad that they didn't go and, build the, crown castle of DeWi, right? That they didn't go build some huge, massive company. So, and maybe they will inside of Nova.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think that we're looking at FreedomFi, for example, do you think that their opportunity to maybe turn what they are doing and build a bigger castle within that ecosystem, do you think that's possible by the Nova acquisition? Or do you see projects, for example, that were maybe not doing what FreedomFi was doing, but they want to sort of create their own stamp on the world, and working independently of the existing players? Like, how would you think about that if you were a founder that was interested in going out and doing some new exciting project?
Yeah, I mean, like we can talk about particulars. I think Pollen is challenging, because like there's no market for their token, and so there's no liquidity for their token. No one really bought it, and so if you're saying, hey, I want to go set up a tower, I want to go or set up some CBRS access point, and get paid for that, you want to transact in a token that has some level of liquidity. And to be totally fair, Helium doesn't have a ton of liquidity. It's in like the single $1 million a day in liquidity. Sure. And with FTX dropping off, which was like one of the two major exchanges it was traded on, like their liquidity is actually going to continue to drop substantially. So, but Pollen has like really no major exchanges supporting it. Right. And so I think it's difficult. So I just think your efforts better spent instead of trying to like replicate Helium as a token, figuring out how you participate in that ecosystem. And then I would say, Helium has a responsibility to make sure that they don't try to like capitalize on that ecosystem. So I think they're getting better at this. So if like Helium was the only company that was allowed to make miners, this would be like a huge problem, right? But instead they're like, hey, we're gonna have other companies build these miners. I think they go a step further. Right now they have this like whitelist kind of mechanic where like you have to be an approved miner by essentially Nova Labs. Sure, it's like less direct than that. Sure. But I think there's like ways in which this can become more open and more exciting for people to build in that ecosystem. And the more they can attract talented people in that ecosystem, I think the greater and larger, their ecosystem will become. So, yeah, my advice to someone would just be like, don't replicate what exists today. See how you can add more value on top of it.
Awesome. That's really good advice. On that note, would there be other kind of final thoughts or advice that you would give to founders or people that are interested in building within the DeWi landscape and ecosystem more generally?
Yeah, I would stay away from anything that relies on speculation and the price going up and anything like that. And I would focus on like just generally like good business practices of like, does it provide value, and that's why people are paying me. And anytime someone gives you advice and you're rejecting that advice because you say, oh, in Web3 it's different, or oh, in crypto it's different, or oh, in DeWi it's different, you're probably wrong, like in the limit. And so you should really be more open to that advice. Would be my advice.
That's awesome. And I think, especially in light of everything going on, I hope everybody will start taking that to heart, and that'll become the new mantra and thesis as we move forward, because it's certainly a required pill to swallow, as things in the industry are changing and transitioning. Well, David, I wanted to thank you so much for taking the time, for coming on and chatting with us. This was incredible to get your perspective, to get your feedback, to get your advice. Obviously, you have a really unique point being an investor in the space. And so just wanted to thank you. Where can people follow up and kind of stay engaged with what you're doing? Is there a Twitter, LinkedIn? What's the best way for people to sort of follow you, or BlueYard in general?
Yep, BlueYard has a Twitter at BlueYard, so that's probably the best way. But yeah, we try not to be the main character, and I'd say try to spend more time promoting our founders than ourselves. So
understand. That's great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, David. We really appreciate it again, and thanks so much, everyone. Take care.
Have a good one, Tyler. Bye.